Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you for joining us on a Tuesday, a glorious and beautiful Tuesday, to be above the mud. We're live in Charlottesville, across Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille Network. Folks, look at the rundown on screen if you're watching the visual aspect or the visual component of the show. A lot we're going to cover, including the shortage of gasoline in America, the Eastern Seaboard, and in Central Virginia. This topic came up this morning on Real Talk with Keith Smith, Yona Smith, and Quentin Beckham. Yona, Keith, and Quentin each gave their take. We will play that perspective on today's show through a sizzle reel. We'll also catch up with our friend, the Esquire, Elliot Harding, to talk pharmaceutical licenses, in particular, the one that is still open from a cannabis standpoint in our area. Elliot Harding will offer his take on what could be a very valuable pharmaceutical license. I'm going to highlight a church on Ridge Street as well today. This church, the former Music Resource Center, as we've indicated to you in the past on the I Love CVille Network, is currently for sale. The asking price, $1,875,000 for a church that's a little over 8,600 square feet. We got a couple of pictures for you, and we will brainstorm the best usage of this building that is essentially in downtown Charlottesville, right next to the Lewis and Clark statue, the Greyhound bus station, the Music Resource Center, that church. For $1,875,000 asking price, you can buy a pretty epic building. We'll try to crystal ball the best usage of this building. Alex Urpí is going to join us on today's program as well. He's the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, great friend of the program. With Alex Urpí on today's show, we'll talk about Friday's jobs number. Economists were predicting to see more than 1 million new jobs added in April. So when that number checked in at roughly 266,000 new jobs, a shortage of 740K or so, that's a huge gut punch for the economy. Is the volatility we're seeing with the indices tied to this jobs number, tied to the gas shortage, or a little bit of both? How about the 10-year yield upticking? Could it be tied to that? So a lot we're going to cover on today's program. You, the viewer, can participate in the discussion by offering your perspective, asking questions, sharing your thoughts, your comments, your ideas in the feed on any social media platform you're watching this show upon. We'll adapt to you. I think the lead of the program, however, has been something that is gaining momentum on social media platforms, and that's the fact that there are gas stations here in Charlottesville and Central Virginia that, frankly speaking, have no gas right now. We were talking on Real Talk this morning about this very topic. Ray Cadell, he's a musician, a businessman, a real estate agent in this area. He said he had to fill his bus for his band. His bus takes diesel, and he had to go to 10 different gas stations to find the diesel fuel for his truck, his band vehicle. If you look on social media now, folks are starting to get into that, I don't want to call it the panic stage, where this is like the next level of hoarding. I remember during the pandemic, the hoarding of Clorox wipes, the hoarding of toilet paper, and the hoarding of masks was something that really boomed in popularity. I'm curious to see if that's gasoline. Now, we have to ask ourselves these questions as intelligent people and as people that try to see down the road. How will the gasoline shortage affect our home, Central Virginia, the area we love? We brainstormed this on Real Talk. I'm going to play a sizzle reel for you in a matter of moments. Topics that came up. Will the gasoline shortage impact real estate and someone's willingness to drive to the other side of the mountain, Waynesboro, to buy a home? Now, we've thought that electric vehicles will entice people to drive further from their place of employment because electric vehicles can help offset overhead associated with fuel costs. The reality is, while electric vehicles are growing in popularity, they're a small aspect of the driving market. For example, in 2018, there were 1 million electric cars on U.S. roads. As the annual sale of EVs reaches the 1.4 million mark by 2025, there could be more than 18 million electric cars on the road in 2025. Regardless, the share of EV for Americans driving around on our roads is very slim. So when gas prices uptick, Americans, Central Virginians, Albemarle Countyans, Charlottesvillians, they have less disposable income at their disposal. So here's how I see it playing out. If gas prices keep going up, thanks to this pinch in the Colonial Pipeline, thanks to this cyber attack that shut down a pipeline that, frankly speaking, funnels much of the fuel to the East Coast and the Eastern Seaboard. I see it playing out this way. And Judah, let's get that sizzle reel ready to go so we can give Quentin Beckham and Keith Smith and Jonas Smith's take on this as well. Less disposable income is going to first impact folks' willingness to spend money at restaurants, bars, music venues, retail outlets, fun stuff to do after work. If gas goes up, folks have less money in their pockets to do things like that. If gas continues to go up, and if it starts to flirt with $4, that's when you see it potentially impacting human behavior and folks saying, I may not buy that new home in Waynesboro or in the Tree Streets. I may not go all the way to Louisa or the Shenandoah Valley for the house that I can afford. Maybe I consider staying around the epicenter of employment, Charlottesville, a little bit longer until the prices stabilize. This is something we should follow. It's certainly something gaining steam on social media right now. Here's what Keith, Quentin, and Yona had to say about the gasoline shortage tied to the Colonial Pipeline and a cyber attack that essentially shut down one of the most important pipelines in America. Judah, do you have that sizzle reel ready to go? Yeah. All right, let's cue that up, sir. In 3, 2, 1.
Pivot.
Andre Xavier says, I think so. Due to the panic, people are stocking up. There are gas stations out of gas already in this area.
I saw that. Yeah, I had a friend of mine Facebook message me this morning. Where can I get gas?
I think it's going to eclipse next week. We'll see if it goes over 325. Time will tell. I'm curious to see if fuel. Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah. That's what this is.
If the price of gasoline continues to increase, which it's been low over the last few years, how will the increase in gasoline impact the real estate market in Central Virginia?
Good question.
I think I'd like to ask a better question.
Okay.
If gasoline fuels everything in our economy. Petroleum products, they fuel everything in our economy. So how would the rise in gasoline prices affect the economy?
Yeah.
Overall.
Well, my question was based on this. I thought you guys may respond by, if gasoline prices uptick, maybe the drive to you qualify mindset gets dampened a little bit. Because we've talked about when gas was well north of 3, approaching 4, that 40-minute commute from the other side of the mountain to Charlottesville has a little bit more, should I really be doing this?
But I think there's two factors that are different the last time when this was approaching $4 gasoline.
Okay.
One is what Quentin drives, an EV.
Sure.
VW just started releasing this week its ID4 for its $35,000, something like that, after the rebate. So it's a little bit more achievable. I think they've got a long way to go before that. But you and I have talked about this all the time. I think the advent of EVs are going to to change that a little bit. And I think the second thing that's going to happen, in my opinion, is the discretionary dollars are not going to be spent going out for dinner. It's just going to be spent on fuel.
What do you think, Yona?
I would agree to that. I really would agree with that. Just because of the fact that I think that the demand is so high, the pent-up demand is so high, I really don't know if this is going to really impact us or impact somebody who's looking for a home. They may think about cutting down on the distance, but I really don't know if it's really going to impact us. I think it's going to impact more folks thinking about going on vacation.
I also think it's sort of the frog in the water. You know, where gasoline prices tend to get turned up slowly, and people don't think in terms of it until, you know, we've got some panic buying, but people don't think in terms of planning their overall life around it until something really hits them hard and fast.
But the last time this happened, it upticked fast.
Oh, yeah.
It upticked like
2008, 2009, it really went up.
Like from one day to the next substantially, I think, if I remember
Yeah,
it
but then
correctly.
it came also back down again. This was, I think, for a
Yeah,
period
it came
of
back
time.
down pretty quickly. If you trace out GDP in recessions, they operate in a linear fashion with gas prices. And so if you want to see recessions leading in and economic productivity and unemployment and all going in bad directions, it is opposite to gas prices because so much of the economy runs on that. I think when we talk about are people going to change how they commute, hard to do that. It's hard to compare I'm paying $1.75 more per gallon versus $150,000 price delta for the home I want. And how does that play out?
Well
it's
said.
really complicated math. And we know when we buy the home price is fixed. But we can buy an EV. We can get a more fuel efficient car. We can change how we travel. We can work from home more. And so I think it affects the housing market less in terms of its direct effect on decision making and more in terms of are we creating jobs at a healthy rate? Are people making good wages and what are the cost of goods?
So that's sound and video from Real Talk, which airs Tuesdays and Fridays on the I Love CVille Network at 10:15. Jonas Smith, Quentin Beckham, and Keith Smith on the gas shortage. The operator of the Colonial Pipeline fell prey to a ransom attack on Friday, forcing all pipeline operations to stop. The Colonial Pipeline is the largest fuel pipeline in America. It's been crippled since Friday thanks to this cyber attack. As a result, the supply chain is pinched and fuel prices are going up. Let's extrapolate what else could happen here, please. Not only will we potentially have less disposable income if gasoline prices go up, if we have less disposable income, that first is going to impact businesses like music, restaurants, booze, and happy hour and retail, right? If the prices continue to go up, that'll drive more tailwinds behind the purchase of electric vehicles. That should drive more tailwinds behind public transportation. And that could potentially slow the momentum of people moving to the other side of the mountain for more affordable real estate. Time is going to tell. Regardless, this is having an impact locally, regionally, and nationally. We'll talk about this with Alex Urpí in about 8 minutes on today's show. Now, I want to get to another topic that's flying under the radar. Last week, we had attorney Elliot Harding on the show. Elliot's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to the law, when it comes to helping business owners, when it comes to politics locally. He's just a very connected and intelligent guy, grew up in this area. I asked Elliot, who was on set here on the I Love CVille show, about cannabis in this community. Listen to this answer when it's in regard to the area's pharmaceutical license. This is something that's also flying under the radar. Do you have the sound from Elliot Harding from last week? All right, let's play that sizzle reel. Here's attorney Elliot Harding talking cannabis and the area's pharmaceutical license, which is still up for grabs. Guys, Judah Wickower in 3, 2, 1. What's your answer? This is from Laura. She says, Jerry, ask Elliot from a legal standpoint where he sees the cannabis market heading in Central Virginia.
Right.
So that's a broad question. I have some specific questions for you. Why don't we start with Laura's broad question?
Well, the unique thing about cannabis right now, forget what's about to change in July, and we'll get into that in a second. We live in the only health service area where the pharmaceutical licensing hasn't come to fruition.
Right.
And so, some folks may look on the news and think about Richmond or Tidewater area or Northern Virginia, where the pharmaceutical license holders have already
been established.
Yes, they've been established, they received their license, they've gone up and growing, and now they have dispensaries. Now, granted, you have to have a medical license.
Can you explain to them what the pharmaceutical license means?
Sure. It means that you've been recognized as having a medical need or a medical benefit from the use of cannabis. You've spoken to a doctor, you've paid your dues for that license or that registration, and you can go in and purchase from the pharmaceutical license holder. In this area, it was originally granted to some folks who were going to put one up in Stanton, and I think that they were a little late in putting the wheels in motion on that, and so the state reopened the application process. They have yet to determine who they want to give that license to. Ironically, the original license holders are challenging whether or not they actually lost their license.
Is that the Stanton team?
I believe so, yeah. And so that's why you're not seeing medical or pharmaceutical dispensing in the Central Virginia area, is because that health service area has yet to be satisfied. Now, that'll likely change, but then soon, and so you'll see the pharmaceutical sales. But then, of course, come July, you can have home grow, up to 4 plants per household, and you can gift it to folks. Everyone has to be over 21. But you're not going to be seeing large recreational THC grows like you hear about in California or Colorado or what have you.
That's Elliot Harding. Big fan of Elliot Harding on this program and this network. Couple more items out of the notebook before we get to Alex Urpí in about 4 or 5 minutes here on the I Love CVille Show. I want to highlight, and then we'll get to your comments. If you have comments on gas, and I see the comments come in, we'll get to them in a matter of moments. If you have comments or questions on the gas shortage, if you want to talk about what Elliot just laid down when it came to cannabis in the area, or if you want to talk this topic, put your thoughts in the feed, share them on social media, hit me up with a DM, tweet me, whatever it may be. This show airs on every social media platform humanly possible. So we'll get to the comments here in a matter of moments. Before we do, how about the property I'm about to show you came up yesterday in a phone call I had, I won't say with who, with a real estate investor that owns arguably the most commercial real estate in this area. I would say this gentleman owns the most commercial real estate in this area. We were talking about a lot of properties. This one came up. Get it on screen. Please, sir. Thank you, Judah. 105 Ridge Street. This is the church that used to be the Music Resource Center, the one by the Lewis and Clark statue. Judah, you have 3 photos there, right? You got the out front, you got the front and the inside. How about the map? Can you get the map on screen too? Johnny Pritzloff and Jenny Stoner have the listing from Cushman, Wakefield, Tallheimer. I'll give you some specs first. The asking price for 105 Ridge Street is $1,875,000. This property ain't cheap. It's over 8,600 square feet. I mean, you got a premium location. You're basically the entryway to the downtown mall, this church. The lot size is small. It's 0.17 acres, 0.17 acres. The price per square foot is $218 a square. The property was built in 1867. So here you got clearly a church from the outside, a massive worship service on the inside with the location in an aerial view of every restaurant, close to every restaurant, and in the most popular shopping and dining quarter, which is the downtown mall. What would you do with this property? That's the discussion I was having on the phone with a gentleman that I will not name. Do you convert this property into a gym? He was saying oftentimes churches like this are converted into gyms. But obviously we have enough of those in Charlottesville and Central Virginia. I've said on this show, the 3 or 4 most competitive and saturated business categories in Central Virginia, I think number 1 is realtors. That is a super competitive and super saturated category. Number 2 is probably restaurants. Within that restaurant category of competition and saturation, you probably could have a subcategory of like coffee shops. There are a ton of coffee shops in this area. However, I think the most competitive category from a business standpoint in Charlottesville and Central Virginia may be the gym business, the boutique gym business model. I'm including the yoga studios. I'm including the traditional gyms. I'm including the spin gyms. I'm including the gyms that you pay a monthly membership, the gyms that you pay that you can check out by the hour, the yoga studios, the spin studios, the cold yoga, the hot yoga, the aerobics, all of them. I'd say that is the most competitive and saturated business category in Central Virginia is the boutique gym. So perhaps the church, its best use is not a gymnasium, because we already have a lot of those. What would you do with an 8,606 square foot church with an asking price of over $1.8 million in downtown Charlottesville? The potential is off the charts. Will someone jump on the potential? Only time will tell. We'll get to your comments here in a matter of moments. Before we do, I promised my man Alex Urpí that I would get to him at 12:55. And shockingly, Alex, I am on time today and not making you wait. So I'm going to try to reach out to Alex Urpí, CEO of Emergent Financial Services now. So much I want to cover with him. Judah, we got him on the line. This guy is the co-star of Today y Mañana, which airs on Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network. Alex, first, thank you for joining us. A lot I want to cover with you, including the Colonial Pipeline closure. Before we get to the Colonial Pipeline, my friend, the jobs number from Friday was pretty awful.
It was a big surprise to say the least. I don't think I've ever seen it. I mean, obviously when you're aiming for 1 million, that's rather unusual in itself to have a jobs number, but to be off by 800,000 was a very large shot, and I think the market was definitely feeling that shot a little bit on Friday and maybe even a little bit into this week.
So the economists predicted 1 million new jobs last month. Mm-hmm. I think the number was around 266,000.
Correct.
Yeah, so we're talking a massive disparity of just a rough estimate. We're talking 750,000 jobs we were short. This is the question I have for you. Did these jobs go away? Are these jobs where the employer cannot fill because the people that were previously working these jobs in the last 15 months have found a new career? Has the internet and Zoom and virtual communication cannibalized these jobs? Are these jobs tied to business travel that hasn't come back yet? The restaurant sector? What's going on here?
It's difficult to say. I think my suspicion is it's a combination of many things. I think definitely, and you were talking about this a little bit last week when I was watching your show. I think part of it obviously is the question of, are we incentivizing people to stay home? In other words, if the more you push up the base rate at which you stay home and there's leisure in terms of the unemployment plus COVID, the higher a job offering has to be for someone to be incentivized to stop staying at home or doing side jobs and to then go into the marketplace. So I think that's one factor. Definitely, I think we're probably seeing the result of some skills mismatch. You know, when someone is, we see this every recession, when someone is unemployed for as much as 12 months, suddenly the skills that a job is looking for and the skills that they have no longer match. Maybe that same job that they had 12 months ago now requires skills that they no longer have, or that someone else is now primed to take from them. I think that's a factor. We may be reaching that sort of critical point where the economy has rebounded so much that were now at the margins. In other words, the remaining jobs are those in the areas that have not, you said, that have not yet come back. Maybe some of the travel positions, some of the business travel. I know some people that were in account management for businesses, and those jobs have not yet returned completely, because you're not sending your account manager to talk to clients in person anymore. You're hiring one person who can now do all the clients via Zoom, because that's how it's working. So I think a combination of factors is leading to this, and I guess the surprise is someone that economists did not suspect it. They clearly saw the economy being a little further on than it is, or underestimated the impact of the unemployment that we're currently giving on top of the usual unemployment.
On Friday, we have a bad jobs number. On Friday, we have the Colonial Pipeline attacked by cyber attackers. This is the largest fuel pipeline in the United States. Do you attribute the volatility we saw yesterday, some of the volatility we're seeing today, directly to these two things?
Oh, I think so. Basically yesterday, if you looked closely, the only sector that was rising was energy. So we had that weird combination where the Dow Jones was up in the morning and the S&P and 500 and the NASDAQ were crashing, that's somewhat unusual to see, although we've seen it a bit this year, just because the expectation is that energy prices will rise as a result of this. And so I think it's definitely having an impact, because the market's looking at that and saying, well, now there's another potential inflationary force acting that was completely unforeseen and may have an impact on everything else, because energy undergirds so much of the rest of the inflation that we see in the market, even if its costs are directly taken out of CPI. So that's one thing to sort of keep in mind. We have the CPI X energy, but when energy prices rise, if you think about the cost of transporting goods, the cost of producing goods, those other things that we don't typically think of as energy now become more expensive also. So I think the market may be looking at that somewhat and saying, okay, another inflation headwind.
We talk about supply chains and how supply chains in so many industries are tight and pinched. We highlight labor and how we're having a hard time finding people to work to accommodate these supply chains. Labor clearly is driving inflation in America. One of the things that will really potentially drive inflation is if we start limiting the oil and the gasoline in this country. If we have a pipeline that is not producing at the efficiency or the clip that it should, highlight the impact that this could have. Every supply chain in America is tied to gasoline.
Oh, pretty much. I mean, let's face it, we have not yet moved past, as much as we're putting a lot of money into renewables, no country on earth has moved past the use of fossil fuels. Particularly if you're thinking about the way we transport goods in this country, we still primarily use trucks. We don't yet have trains going all over the place running on natural gas or on other types of energy, and so that's a major impact. And I think it's just one thing always that I like to keep in mind with these is that it's the shocks to the market are usually things that cannot be foreseen, because things that are foreseen are priced into the market. So when you think of a stock like its earnings call, well, if I know what the earnings are going to be in 3 months, that's going to impact how I value the price of the stock now. So that stock might not have a shock move in 3 months when the earnings come out, because everyone factored it in. This is what we call like an exogenous shock. It comes from outside. It's totally unsuspected. So there's also that factor of uncertainty. Now what's going to happen? How much of an impact is this going to have? How long is the pipeline not going to be running fully? And you add energy costs. So now your cost to produce things has gone up. Like you were just saying, the labor, either you have to pay an enormous amount to incentivize labor to come back, or you just have worked with a shortage of labor, in which case your supply chain is now has a shortage of goods, which pushes up the price of those goods. So we're seeing, I was just talking to a friend the other day about how much construction supplies have increased. He was looking at potentially building a house of his own, and he said, I was looking at everything, and everything from the basic of the wood that he would need to purchase to do this has increased in price. And he said he would call them up and they say, well, it's because there's a shortage. We just don't have enough people to cut the wood and send it down, whatever I don't know enough about the lumber industry to know all the
Sure.
steps there, but to go through those steps to the point where the wood shows up in Lowe's ready to purchase.
So a couple of facts for you guys on what Alex is talking. A 2x4 before the pandemic was $3. A 2x4 right now is $11. The cost of goods tied to lumber has increased so much. I learned this morning from Keith Smith, the average new construction home is selling $35,000 higher because of lumber prices going up. So fuel and labor. This is a topic that came up at a month ago on the show. Mm-hmm. Are we worried about inflation now?
So I think it's always a matter of the time period. And so if you say, are we worried about inflation in the short term? And so short term economically, maybe a year. And you could say yes. I mean, definitely as we're entering this phase where the economy is we're not operating on full cylinders, right? The demand may be approaching full cylinders, but the supply is not. That pushes things up in the short term. It's what you call supply shock, basically. Long term, I think that remains to be seen. The question will be how long some of these factors last. I mean, unemployment, I know the COVID extra was pushed to September. Does it get pushed beyond September? We're not sure at this point. Do people begin to feel I would question what's the critical mass vaccination rate at which people feel comfortable enough going back to work in some of these situations? Is it, I know in Virginia, what are we at now? 50s, well, in Albemarle, 50-something %. Virginia maybe in the 40s. Are people waiting for 60, 70, 80%? If we don't hit that number, are there still going to be a segment of workers who say, well, I'm just not going back to my old job. I would rather do anything else than go back out there if I don't feel comfortable. So I think until those get resolved, we may be looking at some short-term inflation just because of the mismatch between demand and supply. The question is, long-term, are we seeing an economy roaring so much that you get your typical inflation where like demand is always outpacing supply? I have my doubts on that because you just look at where we are and it's not as though we're looking at a roaring economy where it's only the result of supply shocks that we're having these issues. I mean, we're looking at an economy that if it weren't for these certain supply shocks with labor and energy, we wouldn't be sitting here saying, oh, the economy is doing fantastically. So I think the demand has sort of an upper limit that we're still looking at there.
This is interesting. So this comes in via Twitter, and this is from let's say Jason, and he says, Jerry, ask your guests if the $300 weekly supplemental unemployment benefits should end immediately. Last week, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was calling for an end of the $300 weekly supplemental unemployment benefits. So I'm going to add some background to this. Via Twitter, who's listening on that platform, they're saying basically if you end the unemployment benefits, then this could get people back to work. Do you buy that?
I think in part, yes. I mean, there's no doubt just anecdotally and rationally. And I think sometimes we're tempted to call it like a moral hazard. But for me, it's just people are mildly intelligent. Like we're, as human beings, if you pay me more, the more you pay me to stay home,
right,
the more I'm going to have to be incentivized to go out and work, right? And so it doesn't necessarily make people bad. It just makes them rational in a sense. And so I think it's hard to know whether they need to end immediately. I would argue maybe they don't need to be one size fits all. I mean, maybe the question needs to be, are you in an area where COVID is still raging and you're very worried because we failed to vaccinate people at an appropriate rate? Maybe that state should leave it a little more. Are you in a place where there really is no health reason to be holding people back from work and clearly the jobs are there? Maybe that's a state where they should really reconsider this. I think part of the issue we often have is it's a one size fits all. I mean, in many cases, these are federal health benefits, and maybe the situation in different parts of the country is not the same. I mean, just looking at, you've said it here, looking at Charlottesville, Albemarle, there's a lot of really small business owners that they're ready to go and safely serve their customers, and they just can't find people to take these jobs. And a lot of times, anecdotally, we'll hear it's not because the person's worried about COVID. They're vaccinated. It's because, well, you're not. I can get paid so much to stay home and possibly take a side job that maybe doesn't show on the books, that I'm not gonna bother going back and have all this income taxed.
I was talking, I won't say which brewery. I was at my favorite brewery in this area, and if many of you watch this show, you know what my favorite brewery is. And I was talking with management at my favorite brewery in this area, and Alex, they said they were 50% understaffed. And they cannot find people to come into work. And the crazy thing, here's the crazy thing, and I'm going to throw this to you, and then I'm going to throw Johnny Ornales' comment that just came into you. This is the crazy thing. More restaurants are now reopening now because we have consumer confidence. People are getting the vaccine. We're getting on the other side of this pandemic, knock on wood, we hope. So more restaurants are coming online and opening more full service capacity. And they're doing it at a time where the current ones that are kind of already tried to open and have been leaders in this from the pandemic can't get enough staff. And then Johnny adds, throw this in the mix as well. May 1st, the minimum wage is going to go $9.50 an hour. So what do you make of all this? The show is yours when it comes to the mom and pop here locally.
It makes it very difficult for them. And, you know, you'll often hear, I mean, the response that is often heard is, well, they should just pay more, right? And you sit there and say, well, if you're a mom and pop restaurant and you're barely making ends meet as it is, it's not as though you can just jack up all your costs in order to compete with the government sending people extra money. I mean, the government adds $300 a week to someone's paycheck. Well, that's not a big deal. They issue bonds. Your mom and pop shop isn't just what are they going to do? Go issue $1 million of debt to be able to temporarily keep pace in this, only to then, you know, drop their wages later on? No one would want that either. So it makes it very difficult, I think, for the small businesses here to really compete with this. And the minimum wage, I mean, we'll see. I think the larger impact, the minimum wage probably isn't even as big an impact as the $300 a week extra in unemployment, because even if a business started paying that higher minimum wage, they probably still wouldn't be able to compete with the incentives that are being offered not to go back. So it just makes it really difficult for our mom and pops here that are trying to, you know, restart things and get things going again in an area that has a pretty, I mean, in Albemarle County in Charlottesville, it's a pretty high vaccination rate. I think we're over 50% of the population.
Albemarle County is the best in the Commonwealth. City of Charlottesville is number 3 in the Commonwealth, and you're 100% right.
I mean, it's over 50%. So the longer that goes on, the more you have to question, is it discomfort with the pandemic, or is it purely rational? And I'm not making any like adverse judgments on someone who stays home to collect the unemployment. It's a rational decision in the face of the incentives that are being offered.
I just got sent a photo with the message that the line, Judah, you'll appreciate this. Alex, you will too. The line at the gas station at Costco is 72 cars deep right now.
Oh my goodness.
The Costco gas station has a line that is 72 cars deep right now at the Costco. Are you more concerned about this gasoline pinch or the labor pinch and how it could impact the economy?
Well, long term, the labor pinch, because that's at least until September that those have been extended. I would certainly hope that the pipeline is able to come back online sometime in the next couple weeks. I think we're to 72 cars at Costco strikes me as a little bit of that's running the bank kind of.
It's the panic,
behavior.
Alex.
You get nervous. Yes,
Yeah.
The panic comes in and people go there. I would certainly hope that a pipeline should be able to get its act together in a couple weeks after this, or at least next week, I would hope, to really start flowing again. I mean, if we're still talking about them being down in September like unemployment, then we have serious crisis on our hands.
Ray Cadell says, I just came back from getting diesel fuel. I ran into 6 stations locally with no gas at all, and only at number 10 did I find diesel for the truck. Other folks are giving us updates here of what's going on. Interestingly, this update came in, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but they thought it was really important. And this is from Alex. Jerry, I just thought, not you, Alex Urpí, but another Alex. They said, Jerry, I just thought you and Alex should know the Chick-fil-A on Route 29 is closed for remodeling, and this is a really big deal. That's what they just sent us right there. They said the Chick-fil-A on Route 29 is closed.
I guess if you love Chick-fil-A that much, it's a very good deal for you. But that's like the guy who's sitting there with like the newspaper and like the world is ending around him, and he's like, "Oh, did you hear what happened with the ball game today?" And then like there's like meteors falling around him.
Oh, that got me laughing. We're talking about doom and gloom, and someone chimes in about the Chick-fil-A on Route 29 being closed for remodeling. Oh, my friend Alex Urpí, I love you, homie. What's planned for today y mañana on Thursday?
Oh, it's going to be a fun one. We're going to have Vicky and Mark. So they're the owners of La Toile Catering. So they have a lot of great news about things that they've been doing during the pandemic. They've been really active, just giving back to the community, helping people. We'll talk a little bit about what reopening looks like for them, how that's been. So I think it'll be a good little deep dive into, what it's like to have a catering company at a time like this, and how you sort of all the different ways you can navigate. Because I think sometimes we use the word like pivot and innovate, and there's a sort of a temptation maybe to assume that looks the same for everybody. It's like, well, I'll just do this or just do that. And I think really it looks different for every single business, because everybody has unique talents. All these, especially like the small business owners, right? We're all individuals. We all have our special talents or special passions, even in the same industry. Right, and so we're all going to respond in different ways. So I'll be really interested to see all the ways that they've been responding in the pandemic. So it should be a lot of fun, and maybe I don't want to assume too much, but maybe a special guest.
Oh,
which a special guest from Emergent. So we'll see what happens.
The social media ninja.
Not maybe him. Well, I can't. I won't say any names. I'll keep everyone guessing.
Mrs. Urpí.
Can't say. It'll be a special guest. I have to keep you in suspense too.
All right, and you're keeping Judah in suspense, and Judah's like, "Oh, okay, great." That's what Judah said.
Tell Judah he won't have to worry about it. It'll be the same number of seats.
He says, "Tell Xavier to put the mic in the right place."
I'll prepare him beforehand. We'll practice. And I'll say, "Where's the mic though? Where's the mic though? There you go.
I would love if it's the social media ninja. That's Nicholas, right?
Nicholas is the social media ninja, and Maito has his perch too. He's a fun guy as well. Okay. So it may be one of them, it may be someone else.
Fantastic. Alex Urpí, CEO, Emergent Financial Services, the co-star, and I believe the executive producer of Today y Mañana. My friend, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having us, Jerry. Fun as always.
You have a good one.
Same here.
Bye. The Chick-fil-A update includes another comment. Jerry, the fact that the Route 29 Chick-fil-A is a big deal. Remember, the mall, Fashion Square Chick-fil-A, is closed as well. That means I went to 2 different Chick-fil-A's today, and neither were open. That's a big deal. That comment comes in via the feed. All right, so Alex Urpí, he's got a fantastic show. It's Thursday mornings at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network. Alex Tiscornia, thank you for that update on Chick-fil-A on Route 29. And that, my friends, is today's show. We will follow the gas shortage with the Costco line. I am looking at a photo now. The photo of someone at the back of a line at Costco's gas station, and the line is literally wrapping through the Costco parking lot and spilling into the Mission Barbecue area portion of Stonefield. So we have some panic on our hands when it comes to fuel. Judah, are you full with fuel? You better get it. I think you'll be okay. You're close to work. And you don't panic for anything. Let's cut to the chase. So that's the program. We are back tomorrow, guys, with the I Love CVille Show. We thank you for joining us. Wherever you're watching, whether it's in real time or evergreen after the fact, this show airs on every social media platform possible. We try to keep this program local for you, whether it's real estate, whether it's business, whether it's hotels, whether it's restaurants, whether it's music, stuff that matters, that's local. That's what we try to do. Thank you for joining us on a Tuesday. We will see you tomorrow on a Wednesday on the I Love CVille Network. Take care.